Hello, my name is Tammy Gaskell, and I'm the director at the Roloff Jansen Community Library, and I am completing an internship with Mid-Hudson Library System and creating some toolkits on reproducing some of the lab projects that we have done at Mid-Hudson. This one is looking at the program, increasing program attendance lab project that was completed in 2019. And with me are a number of the directors who participated in that. And we're going to talk a little bit about what they did and what advice they have for all of you. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and then we'll start talking. So I'll start with Anna Lee. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anna Lee Dragon. I'm the director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library in Columbia County.
Fran?
Hi, I'm Fran Harrison. I'm the director of the Grinnell Library in Wappingers Falls and Dutchess County.
And Chrissy?
Hi, I'm Chrissy Lawler from Olive Free Library, and we're in Ulster County.
And Dawn, it looks like you're muted. There you are.
Hi, I'm Dawn Jardine, Director of Red Hook Public Library.
So thank you all for agreeing to participate in this. I've learned a lot in looking at what you all did a couple of years ago, and I'm sure your colleagues will appreciate it as well. I wanted to start out by just asking you all why you decided to participate in this particular lab project. Was there something about it that drew you to it? Was there some particular issue at your library you were wanting to address? Just, you know, what was your motivation for participating in this project?
I think for me, it was just, I don't know, we spend a lot of time and energy on programming at our libraries, all of us do, and a lot of money too. And so it just seemed like, why wouldn't you want to try to get more people? I mean, I feel like most of us, we probably do pretty well as far as attracting people, but the idea of being able to increase it and reach more people seemed interesting to me, because if it's such an amount of time and money and energy spent on something, you want as many people to benefit from it as possible.
I would agree. At Olive, we have a robust programming schedule, and we do a lot of programming. But we had started to see that not as many people were coming to our program. So we were just trying to think of different ways to keep having people come to the library, and that maybe we needed to change some of our strategies.
I think for us, we were coming, we had just had some disappointing adult programs that just, you know, several of them that just only one or two people, or in one case at least, nobody came to. And so rather than looking at it as programming in general, I was kind of looking at it as adult programming and how can we do better with our adult programming.
Do you have anything specific, Fran, that drew you to it?
I think for me at Grinnell, you know, there are a lot of the things that we actually drew from saying, well, this has always drawn people. So there's almost like this standard rotation of people that you bring back year after year. But you do kind of look at some of the numbers saying, are we bringing them back because we've gotten comfortable and they do have a draw, or is it something that our patrons are really looking for? So for me, it was as a newer director saying, you know, let's look at it from a different lens and say, you know, maybe we should, you know, expand our horizons a little bit. And not to say that there's anything wrong with repeat programs, but to make sure that our motivation for the repeat programs is the right one, just that it is meeting needs of our people and not just, it's just easy for us to contact Mr. Jones and have him come out and do the same song and dance every year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's valid too. Just we get a lot of us, you get the same people. There's a group of people that are really invested in the library and the programs you do, but what about all those other people that don't ever come in? And
Right.
How do you maybe do something? So it's like some data-driven decision-making about the types of programs offered or the number of programs offered, because I do think too, you get too many programs, like we all want more, and I've been guilty of the same thing, but I feel like there is in each area a cap at the number of people that are going to come. And at some point when you're doing 50 programs instead of 10, you may get less people at each program. So you're still hitting, like there's a ceiling. And are you just dividing your own audience into more segments and costing yourself more money and time when those same people would come to 10 or 12 programs.
Right.
And you wouldn't, you know, be doing all of that work and just dividing the audience up.
Yeah, and looking at this project and what you did, it sounded like the first thing you talked about was just like, why do we do programming? And, you know, what's the purpose? And, you know, what are we trying to accomplish? And so one of your tactics was to develop a programming mission statement.
Mhm.
And I know some of you revised your program policies in response as well. And the other, just to let everybody else know, the other strategies you employed were to develop talking points for your staff about individual programs so that they could tell people in the community or in coming into the library what was coming up, and to reach out to non-user groups to get those people that you aren't getting every time. So I'd like to then, you know, having said that, ask you, you know, what were the challenges you faced in implementing any of these policies? In my mind, I can imagine reaching out to the non-user groups being the most difficult, but
I think for us at Grinnell, and I see it now, we're doing a community survey to help us with our long-term planning. And the people who really push the survey are also the same ones who push the programs. I think by personality, you're going to have some staff members who step up 100% because this is what they do. And then you have the ones who are very reluctant. I mean, I see their reluctance and their reticence in terms of pushing the community survey, which I'm really looking for because we need that data to help formulate our plan for the next 3 years. We're also the ones who were a little reluctant to push the programming because they don't want to get in people's face, or they're just saying, you know, they just want to come in and get a book. So I think that it's recognizing that you are going to have those staff members who are not going to be as forceful in promoting library programs or the community survey or whatever it is that we're giving out that week. And to recognize that it's not that they're not supporting the library, but there is some aspect of their personality that will make them more reluctant to do so.
I also think one of the challenges when we talked about all of this was the idea of convincing both board members and myself sort of that what we came to, one of the big conclusions was simplify, like less is more, do higher quality programs and do fewer of them, because A, you're dividing your audience, and B, if you're doing, you know, however many programs you're doing at your library, like you're spreading the money and the staff time and the effort and the advertising and the audience out over all of them. And maybe you would be better served to do a few things like really, really well that drew big audiences and made it kind of worth, because when you've done the same amount of effort for a program that draws 3 people as you do for one that draws 50, like it does become what's really the value add here for the library and the community. So I think but we're so data driven. It's just like our circ stats and everything else. We push and push and want to get more and more. And our boards see that as a measure of our success, and the state sees it as a measure of our success. And so really trying to internalize this idea that more is not always the answer. Sometimes it is less is more, and doing those things better.
I think it's also getting the community used to not having all those programs available, even though they may never come to them, or they might only come to one of the 50 that you offer during the month. Their perception of you cutting back and scaling back, you kind of have to like deal with that and make them understand that, you know, you're going for the quality and not the quantity anymore.
Did any of you have any pushback like that from either your board or your communities on the number of programs?
No, it took some amount. And I mean, honestly, I don't feel like we cut back as much as we should have. Like it's a work in progress. Like, I don't know that you're going to go from, say you do, 20 programs a month. I don't think you're going to cut that down to 5 in a single swoop without people getting upset. So I think it's just like anything, change is incremental, and it's probably going to take some time. So honestly, I don't know that I got as much pushback, but that's probably because I didn't cut back as much as I should have and want to.
I think that you had asked about the community, reaching out to non-users.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that, we did it. We went to several organizations and asked them what they would like us to present, what what they would like the library to offer them. But what came out of that was not what we expected. So it didn't turn out that they said they wanted the library to do this or that. But there was one organization that we went to, the VFW, and just the fact that we went there and then they knew us a little bit led to a future collaboration. So it didn't turn out that they said, well, we want this kind of books or we want fishing poles or whatever. But it did turn out that they knew us now. They knew that building across the pond because, we live across the pond from each other. And so when we were doing our summer concerts, we were able to say, hey, you guys want to come cook? You want to sell hamburgers and hot dogs at the concert? And they knew us and they said yes. So kind of an unexpected result there. And I also had the same experience as Fran with staff, not being as comfortable as maybe I would or Amy would, just, speaking up excitedly about programs at the desk. And, we came to the conclusion that that's okay. Not everybody is really outgoing like that, not everybody's comfortable with that. And so that's not a good strategy for us.
Sometimes I think what some of us came to, if they had staff in that situation, was to make up bookmarks that were weekly or something that were what's happening this week, that is a little more passive for if you have people who aren't as comfortable talking up programs, and then they're just kind of sticking a bookmark or because that was what we came to, was a lot of us do newsletters with some frequency, either e-newsletters or print newsletters. But when you do them like I do quarterly, it's too much. Like they don't pay attention. So what you want to focus on is like what's happening this week or today at the library, as opposed to the whole newsletter full of stuff. And so either something at the desk, or a lot of us, like I have a weekly e-newsletter also that goes out that just highlights what's happening that week, because that is about how far out most people are planning. Most of them are not planning the whole quarter out in their head the way we are.
And Annalee talked a lot about paring down programming and doing more meaningful programming and less volume of programming. And I mean, that's certainly something that we've all had to think a lot about in the past year, which is after the lab that we did. But I mean, we actually sat down and we said, okay, we're not going to be doing any programming, any in-person programming anytime soon. What are we going to do on Zoom, and what will make it meaningful, and what's the goal? And what other kinds of things will we do instead? So.
And I think that a lot of the programming stuff, as it's a little different than the card holder retention program, in that the programming stuff is very localized. And so there isn't a one answer for everybody about what the right frequency is or the right way to communicate is. Like I do a print newsletter. A lot of people, it's very expensive and it's very time consuming. In my community, they've been trained to use it and it works really well, but that's not true everywhere. And I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. So I think a lot of this comes down to listening to a bunch of ideas and taking what works for your community and your users. And I mean, maybe challenging yourself by trying some new stuff, but I don't think there's one answer for everybody with programming.
So I wanted to follow up on the non-user groups. Can you talk a little bit about how you identify those groups and how you worked with them or used them?
We kind of just looked around at what else was in like when you see a community calendar of other places doing programs, that was one way that we used to identify them. And then there's just, in smaller towns, like Kinderhook's pretty small, there's just the physical, you drove around and you see the churches and you see the Elks Club and you see the Rotary. And so it was kind of, and then I would just say, well, I don't know anybody at X, Y, or Z place. So maybe, I mean, that's definitely a group that I'm not aware. If they are aware of us, I'm not aware of them in that way. So I know for me, it was just that kind of stuff. It was pretty easy.
It was tangential for us as well. I might know someone in the Friends who paints, and then she would mention the senior watercolor club, and I'd say, oh, who are these people? And it was just kind of in conversation, in passing, and it was just kind of setting out feelers that way and building up the network. It was very much like that for us as well.
What's really cool about what Fran is doing with the community conversations, though, too, is I feel like that could be an avenue to locate non-user groups. Is if you're getting the surveys back, is asking a question about like what other groups, if the person who's filling out the survey, what other groups do they participate in or are they part of? Because that might be a little, you know, in library school, they call it citation pearl growing, but like you might find some, you know, your users are part of these other groups, and then that gives you access through them or awareness of other groups in that way. And we're all trying to do those community conversations for long range planning now. So that might be a good way to do it.
So did you all, or did only some of you do surveys that you distributed through these groups?
I didn't do surveys.
No.
We did, but it was useless.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we went and talked to a couple groups and we brought the surveys and passed them out, and they came back with hardly anything on them. So it was more valuable just to go and meet people and say, you know, my name is Dawn and I'm the library director, and, you know, you're welcome to call us anytime. I think that was more valuable than a survey that said, what kind of books do you like? Or, you know, what kind of program would you attend?
And
I think
we
go ahead. Sorry, Chrissy.
and Olive, we reached out to the Trout Unlimited group and I met with them. We're kind of unique in the fact that there's not a lot of meeting spaces in Olive. So a lot of groups already meet at the library. So they're one of the few groups that doesn't meet at the library. And we ended up, they are donating books to our fly fishing collection, some newer books, and then also donated fly fishing rods. So that was a nice partnership that we created with them. I don't know if in the future, if maybe they'll come and do programs also at the library, but it was nice at least for them to help us, you know, boost our fly fishing collection.
And I think if you're doing surveys, it's kind of like we've all learned with the community conversations. You can't really ask people what kind of programs do you want, because they don't know. So if you just ask them what things they're interested in, like what are topics of interest to you, or what are things in the community that you wish were around that aren't. We had a fiber group come out of that. Like people just wanted a place, not a class, just a place they could all hang out with other people doing it, or a bridge club that did that. And so I think it's, if you're gonna do surveys, the questions you ask are important. And so going at it from a more generic, because they, you know, they're going to think book talks, because that's all that libraries do, right? Especially with non-user groups who aren't familiar with you, they don't know what you do. And so asking them what they're interested in is more valuable than just saying, what kind of programs do you want?
And I think for non-users, when they think programs, they only think book-related programs, you know, that's all we do. So when I said, oh, we have an ukulele strum along, it's really, I mean, it's just not what they think of it at the public library. So you're right, that generic question doesn't work. It can't be, do you want more programs? Because more book discussions, they don't want that. I mean, so.
And that's part of the community conversation tactic, is like not asking for expert knowledge from people who don't know the library. So you're asking them for just generic things, because, and then you figure out how the library could meet that need.
Right. It's learning about the community rather than than more than anything else. And then where do we intersect, and where can we fill the gaps? So do you all feel like you were successful in increasing your program attendance, or was that really your goal? I mean, I always like to think that sometimes numbers aren't everything, and that programs can be measured in other ways.
Well, and I'm going to speak to that, because when I actually did the statistics, when we went to see, it was terrible. I mean, if you looked at it purely statistically speaking, we did not meet that goal of increasing 5% within that window of time. So if that was the only way we'd measure it, if that was the only rubric, I'd say, no, it was a bust. But I think for me personally, it forced me to say, okay, these are people that I don't know, and to really reach out to them and form that relationship. I would say in that regard, it was very successful, because now I have, a relationship with the Historical Society and with the Railroad Club and with the Senior Watercolors. And what came of that for 2020 were things that we had planned, which of course then were canceled because of the pandemic. But it was still, I would say it was successful just in terms of building a relationship. I don't live in this community, So I have to work much harder than people who are, you know, natives of the village of Wappingers Falls.
And I would say that I've done 2 of these lab projects, and while the numbers worked out in my favor in both cases, like it did make a difference. I think with this one, it's harder to say that because unless you're holding the exact same number of programs and the exact same type of programs, you could have had 1 or 2 really popular programs last year that didn't fall within the scope this year. Like it's a very apples to oranges, but I would also say that like the cardholder retention and this, the point ended up not really being, after we did a lot of research, increasing the numbers so much as improving quality of programs and offerings, improving customer experience, patron experience at the libraries, improving awareness of the libraries in the communities we work in. So like, even if you didn't hit that number, I think, like you said, Tammy, the number is not, generally these made our libraries are better, I think, and improved our situation in our communities, regardless of just numbers of, because the so what is a big part of it. Like,
That's
so
right.
50 people came to a program. So what? Did they
What did
learn
get out of
something?
it? Right.
Right. Did they learn something? Did it change their life for the better? Did it make them more aware of the library? Because those are the things that actually matter.
So I had a few questions just on logistics or planning programs, promoting programs. Did you spend much time talking about like how far out should you plan? How do you get the word out? Were there things that you found to be more successful than others?
We did talk about it a lot. At my library, we've just had a situation that I inherited that I keep, which is we plan quarterly. And so we're probably planning 4 to 5 months out. Like I planned the April, May, June programs in February and March. And so like I plan very far out. But then it's the promoting of it, because like I said, we send the newsletter out and that's great, but then they need reminders because they will also sign up for all of the programs right when the newsletter comes out and then completely forget and not show up. So we do reminder calls and emails, which a lot of the libraries were saying they do. So like if people sign up, getting phone numbers or emails and then sending a reminder right before the program, because often it's not that they don't want to come, but their lives are busy and they just forget. So I think like, we did decide that if you're going to do, I think we heard from Jeannie Herman, who was a programming bigwig.
Oh, in Princeton, she named all those journals that I had never heard of, or those newsletters.
She's very impressive. And she was saying that you need like weekly newsletters are best of some version, just because that is the level at which most people are operating for their personal life planning. Like,
but you know what? I don't know if that's actually true. Like we use Constant Contact and you can check, you know, what the read rate is. And I feel like when we send too many, we don't have as many opens because I feel like they're inundated with stuff from the library. So there's got to be a sweet spot.
I think you have to train them. We went from a month newsletter, and then slowly we've gone to twice a month. So I think, you know, at first we were losing people because they were getting it twice a month and they would get annoyed, but now it's been steady. So I think you just kind of have to get them used to.
But do you think if you switch, Christy, to weekly, would you still have that success? Because I feel like twice a month is.
I send ours weekly, and we have a pretty good, like I've sent ours weekly for years, and it's just like the print newsletter. Everybody says, oh, why would you have a print newsletter? It's so expensive. And if you stand at a program of mine and ask people how they heard about it as they come in, 90% of them will say the print newsletter. But it's training. It's like Chrissy said, they had been trained that if you want to know what's happening at the library, that's where to look. And so it took time to develop that.
People have actually asked us to do like a weekly summary of what's going on that week and send it by email. And that is something that we talked about at the lab that I was really intrigued by and wanted to try. But the honest truth is we don't have time to do it. It's just one more thing and we can't do it. So we didn't implement that.
Yeah, we made our weekly newsletter it pulls directly from our online calendar. So there's very little involved, and it's an opt-in, so they have to sign up. We don't get it to them unless they want it. And it's very little. Once the setup was done, we don't do very much. It just pulls from our calendar online.
And then Annalee, is it, do you have like one for youth, one for adults?
No, it's all of it. Because
All
we're
of
not,
it, and-
I mean, yeah, they're not huge. It's like, I mean, we don't put, I don't know that we put our story times, like every single instance of them. So it's not a giant block of stuff. We do a couple story times a week, but it'll say like one entry for those. And then it's like, you know, it's usually 3 or 4 things a week. Our library isn't gigantic, but that stuff goes in there. And then we have a spot on the bottom for like longer term things. If you're trying to drum up, you know, don't forget about X, Y, or Z, there's a spot on the bottom that we can manually change, but it's pretty low maintenance. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it either.
Because that is something I've thought a lot about, is that, you know, when we get back to in-person programming and printing a programming calendar, I would like to print a calendar just for adults so that they can see what's going on for them, that's not crowded out by youth things, because it seems like there's a lot more going on for kids, especially something for adults that we could bring like to the senior apartment complex, so that it's very simple. This is what we have for them this month. So that is something that I would like to do this year.
So it sounds like though this project was in 2019 and then 2020 was hard to implement any of it, that you all are still thinking about it and implementing what you learned as best you can, and will continue this in the future, that you found it helpful. So just to kind of wrap up, do you have any specific advice or tips that you would give to your colleagues who wanted to try to replicate this in their own libraries? What are the key takeaways that you would give?
I think the talking points were very helpful at Olive. We did a bookmark, and each week we would change out the programs and just stick it in, because we had staff like Dawn and Fran were saying that were uncomfortable with, you know, trying to promote the programs or just talk to people about them. So this was an easy way to keep reminding people what was coming up, what was happening. We also had a couple staff members start doing programs. So in addition to the program coordinator and I, we had more staff members doing programs, which really created a lot of buy-in for promoting the programs, not only what they were doing, but then other things that were happening in the library. And I think just, you know, bringing more people into doing the programming really helped with the promotion of it, that they felt more.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with Chrissy. I mean, like when we started open mic, they were talking it up because they had skin in the game, right? Nobody wants to sit there and play a guitar with like nobody in the audience. So the staff members who were in charge of that, they were talking it up with everybody. You would think they were working on commission. I mean, it definitely does make a difference. Absolutely.
And I found the work that we did around a mission statement and or programming policy, to, if you don't have one already, or even just distilling that down into the mission statement, because I think the idea of programming, when you do something, say, that's maybe more controversial, I know this was about adult programming, but we had created the programming statement when I did Drag Queen Story Hour for the first time, and having something that explains that these programs are, you know, meant for a number of purposes, and that the library is supportive of all of these purposes, and that is the, you know, having that policy just clarifies for people. It also just helps you, because when you start doing programming or improving it or offering more, I think you get people that wander in that are like, I want to do a program here. And you have to have a way to be like, especially if you're looking for quality, you have to have a way to nicely be like, that doesn't really work. Here's our policy. And like, and you could even, I think, I can't remember if I did it or not. I think what I did was I made a form that was like, if you're interested in offering something, fill this out and we'll get back to you. But it kind of gave the front desk person a comfortable out for like, they didn't have to make a call on that. And it also gave me a way to then look at the policy and be like, according to the policy, this is the reason that we're, you know, and we'll keep you in mind, or, you know, we'll keep your information. But I think having that, especially for the front desk staff, is important, because people do come in when I'm not there. And ask questions or offer things and they don't always know what to say, and that kind of limits the issues that arise if there is a policy available.
I think that that process of doing a program policy and thinking about why we do programming really helped us also to think about the big picture and how programming fits into the big picture. In other words, it's not just like a collection is over here all by itself and programming is over there all by itself, and our services are over there all by themselves, but how do they relate to each other and how do they support each other? And how do they relate to the community? You know, is this what Red Hook really wants and needs?
Well, that's all very helpful, and I thank you all for taking some time out and talking with us all about your experience.